and welcome back to Bumblebee, where we're about to get rough, tough, and grimy as we hit the war grounds for the top 10 epic battles that changed the course of history. History is full of nearly forgotten battles that shaped where we are now. Obviously, I like to start with the ones that are a more familiar story for us to warm up to. So that'd be how a teen solved an 100-year-old problem. That's right, Joan of Arc, baby. This delusional Bible thumper had visions of God and all sorts of beliefs that historians believe indicated hyper-religiosity, a psychiatric condition in which a person experiences intense religious beliefs or episodes that affect normal functions, logic, and behavior. Anyways, one day Joan heard the voices of a Christian saint telling her to aid Charles, the French Dauphin, in gaining the French throne and expelling the English. In May of 1428, she traveled to Vaucouleurs and told the captain of the garrison of her visions. He thinks she's nuts and sends her packing. But in January 1429, she annoys him enough to allow her passage to the Dauphin. Joan arrives in men's garbs with soldiers and has an audience with King Charles, who approves of her, and set her off on her divine mission, rallying the citizenry, suggesting tactical decisions, and participating in battle. The French retook the banks of the Loire River and Orleans and defeated the invaders. Many say the battle saved France from centuries of English rule. Next up, let's meet the man who beat the Mongols. This is the Battle of Anjalou of 1260. The Mamluks ruled most of Egypt and the majority of the Fertility Crescent, so they were quite pissed when the Mongols came in and snatched Baghdad in 58. A year later, in 1259, the Mongols moved into Syria and Aleppo, at Damascus and Aleppo, and the shores of the Mediterranean. Naturally, they're feeling pretty confident, so they send an envoy to Cairo in 1260 and demand the submission of Sultan Muzaffar al-Din Quwad, whose reply was the execution of said envoy, and so the war was the only answer, I guess. With the army led by Quds, the Mamluks defeated a small Mongolian force at Gaza and then come up against an army of about 20,000 at Anjalou. This is where King David smoked Goliath in the Book of Samuels. No worries though, the Mamluks general was a former fugitive, he'd been in that area a lot, and reputably drew up a battle strategy for the land, copying the Mongols' most successful tactic, feigned retreat. The strategy worked like a charm, and even when the Mongols swarmed from all sides, broke their left wing, the Sultan Qutuz tossed his helmet and screamed for the men to fight in the name of Islam and their love, a speech that motivates the men to gain the upper hand. The Mongol general is then taken prisoner by the Mamluks, and he declared defiantly that Khan would inflict savage revenge for this defeat, so they beheaded him on the battlefield. The remaining Mongols had began to retreat. The Mamluks pursued them for 8 miles to cut them down. The Mongol Empire was thus contained to Iran and Mesopotamia and spread no further. Off to visit our Nordic friends to learn how the Swede Supremacy ended. Very few wars shook up the European power structure more than the Great Northern Wars of the 1700s, the whole purpose of which was the Baltic armies teaming up with the pure goal of ending Swedish reign in the region. Apparently, they sucked and nobody liked them, but thank you for IKEA and the meatballs. Sweden beat all these armies repetitively until 1709. The Swedish invasion of Russia had already failed the previous winter from their loss of major supply column and their failure to receive expected reinforcements. Despite the severe shortages of troops, artillery, and powder, Charles continued the war and besieged Podvala in May. Charles planned to charge past the Russian line of redoubts without stopping to subdue them and directly target the main Russian defensive position. This called for extreme mobility and daring, two things Charles didn't have since he was hella injured. The Swedish attack faltered and the Russian counterattack with 40,000 troops killed and captured the entire Swedish army, except for Charles and 1,500 followers who escaped. Charles was wounded and after the attack handed the command over to a subordinate, and his subsequent counterattack went terribly, resulting in the decimation of a third of Swedish armies, along with the loss of the battle, the war, and Swedish supremacy. How about a family at war? Cleo and the Ptolemys. We all know about Cleo's dramatic snake venom ending, but how about her bloody beginning? It starts when her father dies. Cleo's younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, is heir to the throne. Due to him being 11, a regent's appointed for him, who, with some other court officials, form a close-knit group with the young Ptolemy and feed him insecurity and conspiracy towards his sister, the ambitious and intelligent 18-year-old Cleo. What if she tried to usurp him for the crown, after all? So in 48 BC, this group, fearful of her ambition and power, exiles her when she refuses to marry her younger brother. Cleopatra flees to Syria, intending to raise an army and return as ruler of Egypt. Julius Caesar calls these two siblings to his palace and tries to mediate. This is when Cleo gets the idea to seduce him and starts hooking up with Caesar. The two snatch the throne alongside her younger brother, Ptolemy XIV, and then much later after Caesar's slaying, when Cleo and her son Caesarion flee back to Egypt, Cleo then kills Ptolemy XIV, the other younger brother, so Caesarion can be on the throne. She also had a younger sister, Arinso, who helped conduct the siege of Alexandria against Cleo, so she killed her too in 41 BC. Naturally, this is when Mark comes in, stepping stone of the War of Atticum that lasted from 32 to 30 BC, where Octavian and Mark Antony duke it out over Roman Egypt. After a decisive win for Octavian, Cleo and Antony withdrew to Alexandria. Octavian besieged the city until both of them took their own lives, and Egypt was conquered. Now for the Silk Road Throwdown. Ever wonder why the Chinese philosophers were so incredibly talented and ingenuitive when it came to building weapons and machinery, creating things the Greeks and the Ottomans could only dream of, yet they didn't conquer more of the world? Few people today have heard of the Battle of Talas River, a double-cross caused it. In 750, the king of Ferghana had a border dispute with the ruling neighbor of Chad. He appealed to the Chinese general Cao for assistance, and Cao besieged Chach and offered the Chachan king safe passage out of the capital. Once he did, he beheaded him. Naturally, news gets back to the Abbasid governor, who rallies the troops. Somewhere in present-day Kazakhstan, armies of the Abbasid Caliphate met those of the Chinese Tang dynasty. Chinese records state that the Tang army was 30,000 strong, while the Arab accounts put the number of the Chinese at 100,000. For 5 days, these mighty armies clashed. Then the Karluk Turks came in on the Arab side several days into the fighting, and the Tang's army's doom is sealed. Chinese sources imply the Karlaks had been fighting for them originally, but treacherously switched sides midway through the battle. None of the combatants could have predicted that this battle would be instrumental in transmitting a key invention from China to the Western world, the art of paper making, a technology that would alter world history forever. And did you guys know that this war was the first global conflict? The 7-Year War, colonizers fighting colonizers over land that isn't theirs to begin with. It starts with unresolved disputes. France claims Canada and the Great Lakes, and then the eastern seaboard was claimed by the Brits, who want more, and it causes skirmishes and political disputes. Meanwhile, Prussia preemptively annexed the state of Saxony in anticipation of war, which pisses off all of Europe and the Holy Roman Empire. Then the Russian Empire, fearing Prussia could turn on neighboring Poland and Lithuania, went against Prussia. 1756 saw the war officially declared against the French by the British, and now the 7-Year War began in earnest. Ironically, it's Russia's Empress Elizabeth dying that starts the end of the BS. Her successor pulls the Russian troops back and mediates the Prussia-Sweden truce. This is the same year Spain is pulled in on the French-Aussie side. Meanwhile, Britain is quite literally busy colonizing the ever-loving crap out of everywhere, while France was distracted from doing so. So they win India, the Philippines, Cuba, Galapagos, Martinique, and Senegal. In 1763, it was clear that Austria would not regain what they wanted from Prussia, which was its main goal throughout the war, so they just tapped out, and everyone just kinda stopped. The end of the war was the Treaty of Hubertsburg, signed on the 15th of February, and the Treaty of Paris, signed 5 days earlier. Essentially, to summarize, the treaties that they signed was everyone dividing up colonized land that didn't belong to any of them. And now we'll be touring the tours. Be careful who you ally yourself with. Eudes the Great learned the hard way. Having been threatened by both the Arabs in the south and the Franks in the north, he forms an alliance in 730 with the Uthman Nasira, the Berber emir. Yeah, 1 year later, Uthman rebels against the governor, and the governor Abdir Rahman quickly crushed the revolt, executed everyone, and turned his focus onto anyone Uthman ever allied with. Oopsies, that's Eudes. So, the Duke had enough warning of the coming siege and collected his army at Bordeaux, but they were easily defeated, and Bordeaux plundered as well as areas of Gaul. Eudes then appeals to Franks for assistance, which Charles the Hammer Martel only granted after they agreed to submit to Frankish authority. Charles arrives at the battleground first in 732, and for 6 days the two armies sort of just watch each other with minor skirmishes. Rama's men wait for their full strength to arrive, and when they did, chaos ensued, but it only lasted 1 day. Apparently, a rumor reached the Arab army that Charles had sent scouts to cause chaos in the Muslim base camp. Charles's hope was to draw off part of the foe, and it succeeded. Tons of the Muslim cavalry booked it back to camp. To this, the rest of the Muslim army, it looked like a full-scale retreat was happening, so they all started running too. Then their leader, Rahman, gets killed. So how does this change history? Many scholars have argued that if Rahman had prevailed, which he would have without Martel's trickery, the dominant religion of Europe today would be Muslim. Let's change history for the better. Cruelty to piety. In the words of archaeologist and scholar Ramesh Prasad Mohapatra, no war in history of India is as important either for its intensity or the results as the Kalinga War of Ashoka. No war in the annals of human history have ever changed the heart of a victor, from one of wanton cruelty to that of exemplary piety as this one. Enticed? You better be. In an attempt to conquer the southeastern and south parts of India, which would result in the Mauryan Empire becoming the largest empire in the country, Ashoka waged a war against the ruler of Kalinga in 261 BC. Kalinga had a sound geographical location with trade routes leading to South Asia, and import ports along a strong navy. A powerful state on the fringe of the Mauryan Empire would be problematic. It could disrupt the communication lines between the Mauryan capital and the Pataliputra and its holdings in the central Indian peninsula. The conflict spanned most of the Indian subcontinent south of the Himalayas and the coastal state of Kalinga, costing as as many as 300,000 to 1 million lives. This had a shocking effect on Ashoka and makes him be the only would-be dictator.
Oh my god, that's so itchy.
The only would-be dictator on the verge of glory to just walk away. Ashoka devoted the rest of his life to non-violence and victory through karma as a Buddhist, ending the military expansion of the empire and beginning an era of more than 40 years of relative peace, harmony, and prosperity. In the long run, it did cripple the empire's ability to defend itself from external threats, one of the factors that led to the eventual fall of the Mauryan Empire following his death. But another interfamily battle with Macedonic madness, the Succession Wars. This family shows how a little nookie can go a long way. So Alexander the Great's father, Philip II of Macedon, probably had about 7 wives who all wanted to see their child installed on the throne, including Alexander's mother, Olympias. This starts the Succession War. Ancient historians are like 99.9% sure Olympias had something to do with Philip II's death via bodyguard in 1336 BC. Ancient historian Cleopatra also notes the bodyguard was a former lover of Philip II, who had taunted the king's newer younger lover into taking his own life. Yay. And Philip II's uncle-in-law allegedly forces himself on said bodyguard, making his brain kinda snap, and the bodyguard in retaliation kills his own ex, Philip II, in revenge. You following? It's believed Olympias is the one who snuck him into Philip's chamber. Whatever really happened, the Macedonian family's dysfunction doesn't end there. Alexander quickly started putting rival family members to death to secure his ascension, especially now that the throne was just wide open for the taking. And Olympias had Philip II's last wife, offspring, sneakily disposed of. After Alexander died in 232 BC, which might have been from alcoholism by the way, leaving a pregnant wife but no heir, his disabled half-brother is installed on the throne. The half-brother Philip III's wife, Eurydice, was essentially a beard for the mentally absent king and attempted to turn this figurehead into a real ruler. This put her in competition with Olympias. Ultimately, Philip is executed on Olympias' order, and then Olympias is caught and stoned to death by relatives of people she's killed, and this whole lineage came to a crumbling end. And to end it off, 2 battles, 1 won, 1 lost at the same time. An unnoble slaughter and the warring brothers. Plot A, Inca king Huayna Capac dies and decided to just leave his kingdom to his 2 sons, half-brothers Atahualpa and Huascar, who have 0 in common and can't seem to lead together, so naturally, war! Okay, plot B. While the bros are duking it out with each other, an absolute scum of the earth colonizer named Francisco Pizarro heard the news of riches in the mountain. They send a messenger through to the emissaries of Ata, who at the time was sweeping the floor with his brother Hua. He accepted the proposal to meet the leader from a foreign land. Plot A again. In 1532, Ata's army finally defeats Hua's outside of Cusco. News of this victory reached Ata, who was in the city of Cajamarca. At the time, sightings of strange white-skinned men with wool on their faces were reported as well. This is where Ata, now king, had agreed to meet the foreigners. A and B plot now conjoin. Spaniards have surrounded the city with their weapons, and Ata brings 80,000 people alongside him, mostly unarmed. Hiding Spaniards send a friar to Ata, who doesn't speak a lick of any language but his own, and ask him to accept Christianity. Hand him a Bible. Naturally, he has no idea what he's doing, so he hands it back. Well, that means he doesn't accept Christianity, so he deserves to die, and so does everyone else. The Spanish descend on the vastly unarmed crowd and start cutting everybody down. The conquistadors captured Ata and held him for ransom, who still makes sure to tell everyone, yo, execute my brother, execute him. Ata wouldn't outlive Hua by much. The Spanish do execute him as well in 1533, even after the Incas paid the ransom. Because colonization has never been about spreading the good word of religion, it's always been about theft and greed. If these brothers hadn't been warring when the Spanish arrived, things would be very, very, very different now. Alright, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe if you want to see more of our content, and comment down below if you want part 2 of some more historical battles.